Everyone seems to be really focused on stasis next season. And don't get me wrong, we are definitely going to be rocking some nasty builds. As in a video, will be coming out very soon on those stasis builds. With that being said though, during the most recent TWAB, the artifact mods that were revealed to us are going to make solar absolutely disgusting next season. Which is exactly why we're going to be covering one build per class for my folks that are looking to rock solar right out the gate. To kick things off, we have our hunters. Guys, I cannot express how good your throwing knives are about to be. Solar hunters have long been able to infinitely throw knives, and I've got to say, it is quite addicting when you actually do it. The gameplay loop here is oddly arousing. But like previous builds we've made surrounding knives, they didn't bring much to the table other than, hey, you can throw a lot of knives. But that's changing next week, thanks to a buff coming to Shards of Galanor and the new artifact. Now diving right into our subclass, for our super we're going to be rocking Blade Barrage. For the dodge, we'll be staying on Gambler's Dodge, as it allows us to completely refund our knife cooldown. This is especially helpful, as there are times where that infinite knife loop will drop off. Normally when an enemy doesn't die or we just outright miss a knife. It happens. Now for our melee, we have Knife Trick. This is the premier option for infinite knives, and we'll touch on exactly how that works in just a second. Now for our grenade, it's mostly preference, but healing grenades are always really nice, especially in high-end content. But moving on to our aspects, we have the crux of this build, which is Knock 'em Down. This aspect buffs our Blade Barrage by increasing the amount of knives thrown. But this aspect also will refund our knives energy completely when getting a knife final blow, but only while radiant. And that right there is the secret sauce to the infinite knife loop. Our next aspect can really be whatever you want. We go with Gunpowder Gamble, as giant explosions and free grenades are always fun. But On Your Mark is also a good option for better weapon performance and that extra fragment slot. Now that brings us to those fragments. There's one here that is absolutely must, and that's Ember of Torches. This makes you radiant off of powered melee kills. And before I continue to other fragments, Ember of Torches is the final piece in the infinite knife puzzle. This is because our knife trick will make us radiant off of the first knife. Then once the other two knives hit and kill your target, knife trick will be completely refunded thanks to Knock 'em Down's aspect. Now with the most important fragments revealed, our other fragments include Ember of Ashes, Ember of Singeing, and Ember of Solace. Now moving on from our subclass, we have the exotic armor piece Shards of Galanor. This exotic currently refunds up to 50% of our Blade Barrage depending on the amount of hits and kills it scores. But next season, Bungie is actually buffing this exotic. The buff reads that throwing knife kills will now grant super energy ranging from 2.5 and 5%, depending on the type of enemy killed. So not only will Shards of Galanor be refunding super energy, it will be granting energy while in neutral. And with infinite knives, you can see the potency here. And that brings us to our choice of weapons. Now we have a couple of options, ranging from exotics like Monte Carlo and Bad Juju to feed into our melee and our super cooldowns respectively. By having super gains from our knives, weapons, and the super itself, we should be able to absolutely spam our Blade Barrage. And that's not even where the ability regeneration ends. We still have our armor and artifact mods. There isn't a whole lot of specialization when it comes to our armor mods, but there is one mod I really want to emphasize, and that's hands-on for our helmets. This gives us super energy off of melee final blows, which will compound yet again with all of the previous super gains we just mentioned. Now this brings us to the final portion of this build. Next season, we're gonna have some artifact mods that are gonna be extremely beneficial here. Most of them exist to bolster solar weapons, but our weapons aren't really the focal point of this build. But first, we have Heart of the Flame, which reads that casting your solar super grants nearby allies radiance and increases the damage of your super for each nearby ally. Now the main takeaway here is the increase in super damage. Keep in mind guys, Blade Barrage puts out. We did super damage testing back in season 21, and you can see where Blade Barrage stacks in regards to damage. And keep in mind, this is a one and done super. Now granted, we don't really know how much this artifact mod is going to increase Blade Barrage, but depending on that percentage buff, it could easily become one of the best DPS supers in the game. Now another artifact mod I really want to look at is the Wished into Being mod, which says while your super is nearly fully charged, ability final blows will spawn orbs of power, and wearing Season the Wish armor decreases super amount threshold. And just like everything with this build, we have yet another way to generate super energy. Now I don't know exactly how much Season the Wish armor is going to help here, but depending on how many kills we're going to be getting with Blade Barrage, we should always be close to 50% to begin with. So there's just going to be a small margin of super energy that we're actually going to have to go out of our way to get. The rest of it will be completely fed by this build. And considering the enemy density that we've seen in our previous seasonal activities, getting multi-kills with Blade Barrage should be no problem. Now coming off our Hunter, we have our Solar Titan to look at. Now I know, our Ball Hammer just got slapped to hell and back. I'm going to be looking at it in more depth this week, but essentially guys, the nerf to Ball Hammer reads, when picked up, it now returns melee energy over 1.4 seconds rather rather than instantly. Now I know, Bonk Hammer isn't exactly going to be dead, but it won't have that ease of use of just constantly throwing it into the crotch of your enemy over and over, more specifically against bosses. With that being said, we're already preparing for another solar build outside of Bonk. This build is about consecration and beefing up our new melee alongside our super with Pyrogale Gauntlets. Now this build has us on the Burning Maul super with either Barricade as our class ability. As for that melee, we are in fact sticking with Bonk Hammer, but it won't be the center of this build. For our grenade, just like our Hunter build, healing grenades are fantastic, but again, use whatever you want here. For our aspects, we have Consecration, giving us that deadly slide melee. And next to it, we have Soul Invictus or Roaring Flames. Personally, guys, I go Soul Invictus here, at least for this build, as a survivability off of Sunspots, and that extra source of Scorch is really nice. Now keep in mind, Sunspots are getting a slight nerf as their maximum duration is being decreased. Now if you're in the mood for more damage, Roaring Flames is the route you want to go. For our fragments, we want Torches for Radiance, which we'll get off of our Hammer, and Consecration. Ashes for more Scorch stacks, Searing for giving us our melee back when defeating Scorched enemies, and Solace for longer restoration and radiance. Now out of the subclass, we're using Pyrogale Gauntlets to improve our Consecration and super. This is mostly to assist wherever nuking is necessary, especially champions. Now for our exotic weapon, Monte Carlo is really nice here, as we really want to be spamming Consecration as often as possible. Another option is just a solo weapon like BXR that can roll with things like Incandescent. Now applying Scorch from Final Blows is fantastic in this build, and it gets even better when we talk about the artifact mods that we want here. Before we dive into that though, our armor mods are pretty standard. We can run things like Hands-On for more super, Heavy-Handed to create orbs from our Tiny Hammer and Consecration, Melee Kickstart to give us some of our melee back, although keep in mind, this mod is being nerfed to require at least one armor charge to activate. Then we can run Invigoration for melee energy off of orbs, with Outreach on our class item to feed into our melee again. Now for those artifact mods, on the ability side of things, we have Wished It into Being, which gives us orbs off of ability Final Blows when we are close to our super, and Revitalizing Blast, which reads, causing damage with a solar ability weakens champions, as well as bosses for a short duration. Now we don't know how much it's going to weaken it by, but obviously this would be very good with Consecration and our super, as this means we're going to be able to do a combo of our melee and then open up with our super, which might do some extreme damage against bosses. Now on the weapon side of the artifact, we want Kindling Trigger, which says that Radiant causes solar weapons to apply Scorch to unscorched combatants. Now this is a great way to cause even more burning. And to become Radiant, we don't always have to rely on our subclass thanks to Flint Striker, which says that rapid solar weapon precision hits and rapid solar weapon Final Blows grant Radiance. Now keep in mind, we have a number of solar exotic weapons you can be using here, guys. Hell, you can break out Sunshot if you want. But to top off the weapon portion of our artifact, in the final column, we have Rays of Precision, which says, while Radiance, solar precision Final Blows cause combatants to ignite. And this is very exciting. I can only imagine how many explosions we'll be able to pull off with a number of different exotics. And granted, I know everything here is really focused on our abilities. Don't worry, guys, we're going to be talking about weapons very soon, which takes us to our last build. Guys, we've already covered this build, but this is going to make you want to be a Warlock main this season. This is Rain of Fire and Vex Mythic class. Now, we assumed it was going to be really good, considering that Vex Mythic class is getting a 200% buff against champions, as well as a number of other buffs. We did a damage comparison of where Vex Mythic class is going to sit next season, and it's going to be doing more damage in its linear form to champions than what heavy linears can do. But as you've seen from the artifact mods, there are so many benefits from us being Radiant. Beautiful thing about this build is that Rain of Fire gives us Radiance 24/7 by simply scoring kills with Vex Mythic class. Let's start with Kindling Trigger. Vex will be able to apply Scorch to enemies by simply dealing damage while Radiant, which of course will be pretty much all the time. This allows Vex to dip into our subclass, which it normally cannot do at all. We also have Flint Striker, but again, more of a method here to become Radiant, which we really aren't lacking. So there's really only benefits as if we're using other solo weapons. Continuing on to yet another great artifact perk, we have Revitalizing Blast, which weakens champions and bosses when damaging them with solar abilities. If done correctly here, guys, you can run in there, do an Incinerator Snap to a champion, and then blast them with Vex Mythic class's 200% buff. Should be an instant melt. And then for our last artifact perk that I want to bring to your attention is Rays of Precision, which causes solar precision Final Blows to ignite enemies as long as you're Radiant. I cannot stress how good this build is going to be. Shards of Galanor, I can't wait to use it. Certain Titan builds that we didn't even discuss here, one of them being Path of Burning Steps. I can't wait to use it, but this Warlock build right here, this is going to be a tough one not to use. With Rain of Fire and Vex Mythic class, you will be going Radiant non-stop. On top of that, your Vex Mythic class will be causing Scorch while Radiant. And when you get those precision Final Blows, you will be raining ignitions left and right. right. So there you have it, guys. Just a single solar build for every class. Something I just wanted to touch on. Believe me, there are going to be plenty of builds to try once the new season launches. I'm going to list some dim links down below, though, if you want to just plug and go for these. But lots of nastiness, both for solar and for stasis next season. Well, fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching. And as always,
Slap that like button like your mama told you right.